Hi there, I'm Ellen, Director of Programming here at Progressive Performance. We will be going over the deadlift progression in this video, and we will start with the hip hinge or RDL. We'll start with a PVC pipe, so there's no load, just to get that movement drilled in, and then when that is looking good, we'll add weight and move to a barbell or 2 dumbbells. So go ahead, Joe. Main focus, keeping those shoulder blades really pinched back. A good cue is telling people to stick their chest out, and then putting a lot of weight into the heels and pushing the butt back towards the wall behind them. Joe is going lower than most clients will be able to go or feel comfortable going. So as long as they feel a stretch in their hamstrings, that's low enough, or a good indicator would be telling them a little bit below the knee if they need a set distance. If they're struggling with that, go ahead and put the PVC pipe on your back, Joe. Sometimes it just doesn't click right away, the hip hinge motion, so here's a good step back. You'll place the PVC pipe on the head, the mid-back, and your hips, and then tell them to remain in contact with the pipe as they're doing the hip hinge, so go ahead. If they're doing the hip hinge correctly, it'll stay in contact. If they round their upper back, I'll have you do one with a round chest, Joe. This back end will come up a little bit, so that's a good physical cue to use. You can rest if they're struggling with hip hinge. Now that the hip hinge is established, we will go to the kettlebell deadlift. So here the kettlebell will be centered between your feet. You'll use the hip hinge to get down to the kettlebell, keeping the chest tight, and then bend the knees the rest of the way. So I think of it as a half RDL and a half squat. So Joe will go ahead and do that. Really cue the shoulders being tight in this start position. A lot of people think of the start position as the top, but the important part is the ground to the top. So keeping this motion, and bend your knees a little bit more, Joe. So hips down, chest tall. There we go, yep. So kind of that hybrid between a deadlift and a squat, letting them know it's okay for that chest to drop as long as the shoulders are together. And once this is looking good, move up the weight to heavier kettlebells. And if that's still easy, then trap bar will be the next progression. Once we've progressed from the kettlebells, we'll go into the trap bar. The stance is dependent on the person. A lot of people like to have either shoulder width or a little bit wider. It's not as specific with trap bar. So Joe will do her hip hinge and slight knee bend to get down, keeping the shoulders tight before the stand up, and we'll just tell whoever you're coaching to stand straight up, and then all the way back down to the ground. Really looking for the hip hinge and then the knee bend. If Joe were to just squat straight down, go ahead and show me one of those. The knees push really far forward and the chest kind of stays tall. We don't want that because that's more of a squat, so really make sure that hip hinge is in the movement. All right, so after the progression through the trap bar, if people are wanting to compete in powerlifting or just try out the straight bar, we'll go ahead and set them up for a conventional deadlift. So Joe here is going to step up to the bar, feet about shoulder width. Here they will face a little more forward than they potentially were with a trap bar or with sumo, which we'll go over next. And then she will just get down to the bar like she was doing with the trap bar, really focusing on the hip hinge, shoulders tight like before. Go ahead and pull tall. The difference between this one and the trap bar, the bar is in front of us now, so it's extra important to keep the bar pulling into us. That way there's not a ton of stress on the low back. A good cue for that, you can rest in, is continuing to pinch the shoulder blades together, tucking a newspaper in the armpit, anything that will keep that chest pushing forward, and then potentially sitting the butt down a little bit more. Sometimes they'll turn into an RDL. So getting under that bar, chest tall, standing tall, and then if that is looking good, go ahead and continue to load that. After they've tried conventional deadlift, if you're finding that they would be better off doing sumo or they want to try sumo, go ahead and try it out. So it'll be a little bit wider stance. There's not a one size fits all, so the width of the feet could vary quite a bit, so play around with it as long as they are feeling comfortable and they're able to keep the correct form. Not too picky with it. So Joe will go ahead and find her stance here. The toes will point out slightly as the feet are getting wider, and the chest will actually be able to keep taller in that start position compared to conventional, and then the rest will be very similar, looking for those main cues, keeping that bar close to you, chest tall. And then as soon as that weight is getting heavy, feel free to tell whoever you're coaching to do a mixed grip, and that'll keep that bar from rolling out of their hands if they feel like their grip is their limiting factor. And just coach those small things once they get the big cues down, that hip hinge, the tight shoulders, all of that, and you're just fine-tuning from here. So that is our deadlift progression, all the way from the hip hinge to the straight bar. Regress and progress accordingly, and if you have any other questions, go ahead and ask another coach.